Okay, welcome everybody to this year's summer school. It's nice to see you again. I hope you've been enjoying, today has been quite hectic, and I hope you'll be enjoying the 2 weeks that Festival of Learning that lies ahead of you. It is my great pleasure to introduce tonight to you Don Pinnock, who probably needs very little introduction anyway, but he insists that I mustn't give him a long introduction, but I'm going to say some things nevertheless. I think Don Pinnock is quite well known in the field of criminology and work on gangs and related topics. Don completed his PhD in political science and criminology and has lectured in criminology at the University of Cape Town and also in journalism at Rhodes University. He has published 3 books on gangs in Cape Town. Some of you might remember in 1984 he published The Brotherhood, Street Gangs in Cape Town, Street Gangs and the State. And in 1997 he published Gangs, Rituals and Rites of Passage. And recently Gangtown was published in 2016 and it won the City Press Non-Fiction Award. He's also the author of Elsie's River, which is a small booklet which was published in 1980, and an article from Argy Boys to Scully Gangsters. So this is a subject in which he's done research for the last 30 years. He's also an investigative journalist, and at the moment he's a research fellow at the Safety and Violence Initiative at UCT. As a criminologist, he was one of the co-drafters of the Youth Justice White Paper for the Mandela government, which later became the Child Justice Act. He's a specialist in adolescent deviance and was one of the founders of the USICO Trust, working with high-risk young people. He also branched off into fiction. He published a novel, Rainmaker, which was shortlisted for the European Union European Union Literature Abroad. Welcome, Don.
Thank you. Can I have your one?
Sorry.
I'll strip while you watch, okay? Did we get there? Yes. Okay.
Out of 10.
Okay, you pull.
Okay.
Okay, we close.
We good.
Close enough. You fix it. Okay, thank you. I'm wired. I feel wired. Cape Town is really, it's an enigma. It really is the most extraordinary town. You know, Condé Nast continually rates it among the top 10 destinations in the world. The New York Times recently listed it as among having the top 10 restaurants in the world. Nearly a quarter, I checked, nearly 250,000 people flew in, foreign flights flying in to this city just before Christmas, in the months before Christmas. A lot of people come here. I've got a guest house, a little guest house, and almost all my guests are from overseas. And it's amazing, it completely blows their mind. It's extraordinary to see how foreigners coming into this town just go, my God, it's beautiful, and they have fun, and they love this town. It's also one of the most violent cities in the world. I think it was last year, there were over 2,000 murders a year. And that's 6 a day, 7 attempted murders and something like 84 assaults a day. And that's very high. I think very few cities are higher than that. Honduras, I think, is higher. And so if the media is an indicator of anything, this is a city drenched in gang warfare. And people are getting killed by gangs all the time. Now, In reality, this is two cities, not one city. The city we're in has a very low, relatively low murder rate. If you just take murder, there's always a body in murder, so it's a really good statistic. I love it. And the murder rate in this side of town is, I think, something like 6.4 per 100,000. In a place like Nyanga, it's 200 per 100,000. Totally different cities in so many ways. So, what is this all about? What is this city about? And really, to talk about gangs, I need to start by talking about the city that has given them life. The gangs in other cities, but Cape Town beats them all. There's no doubt about it. So today I'm going to be talking about the city, why they are gangs really, and tomorrow I'm going to be actually looking at what gangs they are. What do we mean by gangs? It seems obvious, but it's not obvious. And on Wednesday, I'm going to look at possible solutions, and those solutions, I have pulled out all the stops, and if it means changing the government, changing the education system, I haven't put a box around it. It's just what we need to do to have a better life for the city. The thing about gangs, the interesting thing about gangs is they're a synecdoche for a much bigger set of problems. They're just one part of they're almost a symbol of that other part of what's happening in the city. And they're also a synecdoche particularly for the larger youth problems. The gangs are part of a huge youth problem in the city and in this country, actually. Just to look at young people for a moment. Last year, 49% of young people aged between 15 and 35 were unemployed. That is the highest recorded youth unemployment in the world in this country. That's very high. Half the kids, young people, don't have jobs. So I'm going to start ticking off the kind of things that might lead to gangs. Half the kids who start school in this country, as you probably know, don't make it to matric. So there's this huge peel-off rate. And I don't like statistics, but the statistics about young people in this country are so extraordinary that I'm going to list a few before we get into this stuff. There are 3.4 million kids aged 11 to 24 not in education, employment, or training. They're known as NEETs in terminology, NEETs kids. 317,000 young people aged 11 to 24 in the city are doing absolutely nothing at all. They're not in school, they're not in jobs, they're not in training, they're in the streets. That's a record for a recipe for problems. A really rough estimate is that there are probably about 100,000 young people in the city who would claim to be part of a gang. Now that's very high. I'm amazed at what the other 217,000 are doing that they're not in gangs. I'm proud of them. I mean, how are they staying out of this orbit that's so compelling? Over 5 million people are living in households in this country where nobody has a job at all. I don't know how you live in a household that people don't have a job. And 26% of kids are living in child-headed households. So, that is already you've got a cohort of people who are going to be a problem. There was a survey, I don't know how they measured this. They found that young people between 25 and 35 were less skilled than their parents. So we're going downhill. Now, what's the noise?
Like a grating noise.
Oh, I think this might be in the wrong place. It's this thing.
It's okay. I'll move the line.
No, wait. Let me see what I can do here. Right. I will. Sorry about that. What's the problem?
No, I'm just worried. Some people want to take notes. It's a little bit dark. Do you mind if we take
No. If you need to take notes and you want more light, that's fine.
Can you increase the volume? We're not hearing you too well. Can you increase the volume?
Up the volume. Okay, how's this? Okay, yeah. Do you want me to repeat that? No, don't worry. Okay. You know, the obvious thing is to say we have a very high violence level. There are gangs, so therefore it's gangs. The surprising statistic, which really surprised me, is that only 11% of, let's take murder again, only 11% of all murders in the town are gang-related. The rest are largely domestic violence. So quite apart from gangs, we have a domestic violence problem, which is a huge issue. And also people who are getting drunk, coming out of shebeens, getting into fights. So, you know, we have a smaller problem than you would imagine if you look at the press, but it's still a huge problem, obviously. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the city and what it's become and what effect that has on young people. And that will lead into a better understanding, I hope, of what gangs actually are and why kids are in them. Now, in the older working class areas, the extended families, the history of this town is a history of migration in many ways, and that migration was always around extended families. District 6 is a good example of that. The people would come to the city because they needed work, because the countryside was not working as it should, or because that's where it's better to be poor in the city than in the country. And they would come to extended families, mother, father, uncle, aunt. If you looked at old District 6, and there's some of you who might remember District 6, it was crowded, it was scruffy, and there was a kind of vibrancy about it that worked. And I was really interested in what that vibrancy actually was. The problem is that, that's what happened to most of the extended family communities in the city. And when it was broken down, what was really broken was not the buildings, but the social fabric of what had held things together in those kind of communities. And if you look at the city today, it's a neoliberal city, if I can use that term. I know it's a contested term, but the neoliberalism in a city requires that it becomes made good for commerce and industry. It works in an international context, and it is it's a draw card. And Cape Town does that incredibly well. If you've seen the headlines recently, Patricia de Lille has been very happy about the fact that we have in the city been drawing people to the city. But the downside of that is it requires that you push the problems to the outside. You push people out that are the problems, and you make the center a powerful industrial thing. And that is really what happened. That's almost why we have two cities. Because that pushed away part is part of the problem in terms of gangs and also in high levels of crime. Now, in the past 22 years, let's face it, things have got better for a lot of people, but they've also got worse for a lot of people. There's been a kind of polarization of what is good for some and what is not good for other. Often when I talk to people in Manenberg or Elsie's River, they'll say nothing changed for us. It just got more difficult. I haven't found any difference in this new government. And so what is it, and it really interested me in what a neighborhood was. What is a neighborhood and what makes it work and what doesn't? The concept of zeitgeist is an interesting concept. It's a sort of personality of an area. Every area we live in has a different personality. That's old District 6. It had a kind of sense of place. That is the new township areas in Cape Town. And what happened, and it's really, I went into the plans of the city when it was being recast and dug up stuff that the thinking that people were putting together for the creation of these sort of places. And it was never questioned whether what sort of families there were. It was always the nuclear family. There was the mother, father, and the kids, and that's how you built buildings for these people when you moved them out of town. And of course, the structure of the families wasn't like that. It was an extended family, and if you have an extended family, the kids get picked up by people if the parents don't pick them up. That's the fabric that holds the whole thing together. People were moved out into these areas, and the thing about them is that they're hard-edged. There's an inside and there's an outside, and that outside it tends to be, it's not watched over by anybody. One of the most important things of the loss of the old areas was the loss of verandas. I've been trying to get urban planners to really understand how important verandas are, and grandparents. Grandparents and verandas are an informal surveillance system that holds an area together. That kind of place has nowhere for that informal surveillance system. And you can't police a community entirely from the outside. Communities that have coherence police themselves in a way. It's not policing, they just are a fabric that holds stuff together, that things don't fall apart. And these new areas are, I'm sure you've been into them, they're hard areas. The adults are inside and the kids are in the streets. And they're hanging out in those hard-edged areas. Now, neighborhoods are so different. I mean, that kind of neighborhood is incredibly different to that kind of neighborhood. And the distinction is we're looking at a neoliberal city, if you like. Or if you don't even need to use neoliberal, it's a city that has huge dichotomies. The Gini coefficient between the rich and the poor in this country is one of the highest in the world, and Cape Town is a fine example of that. And, if you look at what the kids are doing and where they are, I just juxtaposed a few pictures. One's from Manenberg and the other is from, I don't know, is that Bishops? And from what kids are doing at night, what they get up to. In the streets, there's very little that kids actually get up to. So I was digging into District 6, and I came across, there's a journalist called Brian Barrow, and he wrote quite a lot about District 6. Let me read you just something. He was talking about kids. He said, children everywhere, shouting, laughing, whistling, teasing, darting between old men's legs, running between fast-moving buses and cars, and missing them by inches with perfect judgment. Poor, underfed children, but cheeky, confident, happy, and so emotionally secure in the bosom of their sordid surroundings. Everybody loved them. To them, it seemed, every adult on those busy streets was another mother, another father. And I was talking to somebody who lived in District 6 about verandas. And this is what he said to me. He said, when I was 15 or 16, if we did anything rude offhand in the street, like going to bars or smoking or taking a dame out, you'd get a puck, a slap at night. At home, the parents knew about it right away. It was the old men who used to stand at the corners chatting or sit on the stoops, and they'd pretend to be reading the Quran or a comic or playing kerem, but whatever. But out of the corner of their eye, they were really watching you. On the Cape Flats, the safety net collapsed. It collapsed in the mid-70s, and it is increasingly in trouble. Now, what happens when those communities fall apart, and what happens when there's just not enough money and coherence in the new communities around the city? What are the things that are a problem there? One of the really big problems is the absence of fathers. That's Hanover Street, by the way, District 6, Carnival time. And that's the kind of fabric that's District 6 as well, a very veranda-based culture. Now, the thing about fathers is we, and I say we because I'm also a father, are very important, much more important than I realized in the bringing up, particularly of young men. They may be absent emotionally, they may be abusive, they may be not around, but they are important. And the problem is, in the city, 60% of all births are to single mothers. 60%. That's incredibly high. And I've been into the maternity ward, places like Chrysalis, and the nurses will say to me, every one of these girls is under 20 and unmarried. So we have a very, very high birth rate. And increasingly in this country, we have no parent families. The problem is around how you, as a young man, how you understand growing up, how you become an adult. Who do you look to understand adulthood? And kids might not get on with their fathers, and often young men don't, but they watch them all the time. They're checking out how it is to be a grown-up male. And the young woman, because there's more mothers around than fathers, in a sense, in a strange way, they have a better role model around than the young guys. And let's face it, the young guys are the problem in the gang situation. Now, one of the things that really got to me was I was talking to these young guys, and I've spent, it was actually 43 years, I realized the other day, on and off, that I've been involved with gangs, is the multiple personalities that they are required to have just to get on in life. They might be in a gang and they've got a 9mm Parabellum, and they are intimidating an entire area with this thing. Everybody's running and going flat. They are a hero. They are the boss. And then they go home and they say, "Can I give mommy some tea? Is mommy tired?" They revere their mothers because that's their link. And then they might their relationship to girls is conflicted too. A girl who they might want to marry maybe one day, they'll treat very gently, but the gang girls, they refer to them as pompdinger. Yeah, rape is cool, and that's not a problem. That's part of what you do. That's normal. And if those girls, they're going to get it, they're going to get it. And then they come into a sort of the sort of higher income area. Perhaps they need a job or something. And it's, "Yeah, my boss, no, my boss. Can you give me a job, my boss?" I don't know how these young people handle that multiple personality necessary to operate across the city areas. And it's all the way from Hollywood blockbuster to a kind of subservient personality. Now, somebody told me, I said, "Well, what do you need? What do you need to be a man in Manenberg?" He said, "You've got to be, what you really have to be is you've got to be a bad motherfucker. That's what you have to be. You have to embody that." And so these personalities that they emulate in the absence of a father are all sorts of different things that they see on the screen. But what happens without a father, and that's there's a lot of research to show that, is that if you don't have a father, you're not good enough for a father. And one of the deep things that happens within you is shame. And we're going to talk about shame a bit more tomorrow. But that shame in teenage years mixes with anger, and that shame-anger matrix comes out very often as violence. And these young guys create an image for themselves that is almost like that. They want to be invincible. They want to have armor. They want to be sort of armored in the world. Now, that sadness. I work with Chrysalis. I'm a trustee of Chrysalis Academy, and we take young people and we put them through a very intense course process. It's a wonderful place in Tokai if you want to visit sometime. It's run by Lucille Mayer, who's just fabulous. And these kids go through a process, and then they get a job for a year, and they get tracked for 5 years. a lot of kids are wanting to come in, and there was this story this woman told me, one who's interviewing the kids, because a lot come in and you have to interview them. They can't all get in, so you have to have interviews. And she said there was this one young guy, and he was about 18, he was quite a tough guy, and he came and he sat down, and she said, "Tell me about yourself." And he started talking, and he got up and he walked away. And she went like, "What did I say wrong? I hardly said anything," and he walked away. Anyway, she carried on interviewing people, and after a long time, he came back and sat down. And she said, "What did I say wrong? What happened?" No, he said, "Nothing." She said, "Why did you get up and walk away?" Oh, he said, "Nobody's ever asked me about me. I didn't want you to see me cry." Nobody had ever, in his 18 years, been there for him. And that's the problem of attachment. When that attachment is missing, there's that sadness, that shame. And I'm going to talk about sadness on Wednesday. And that sadness and the link to the drug problem and the shame and the link to the violence are really, they're kind of connected in ways I didn't imagine when I started working on the book Gangtown. Now, another thing that I got into, and it was not something that I expected to get into. I'm not a scientist. I have other skills. And what I bumped into was something to do with mothers and about young people. I came across, I don't know, you might know the Dunedin Project. It's a long, many people have been followed from before birth through for 38 years now. That's in New Zealand. The Pennsylvania, I think, has got another one going. There's one that's been running in Holland for quite a long time. So what we're getting out of this is a really good understanding of the trajectory of people through their lives in terms of what happens at the beginning, what happens in the middle, what happens at the 38. Now, these figures came out last month, in fact, and I found them to be very interesting. They call the stress that happens at a very young age biosocial stress. It's both biological and social. It's that matrix. And when they looked at biosocial stress happening in the first 1,000 days, and I'll explain why the 1,000 days is important, they found a much higher level of criminal convictions in the teenage years, pharmaceutical drug abuse, welfare benefits, and men using violence against their partners. So there seems to be a problem about the very early years and prenatal years and violence. That link has been increasingly established, and it's quite a controversial area. Now, in South Africa, there's a link, and it'd be nice if we had a Dunedin project starting here, but very early sexual activity you have. A lot of mothers are malnourished during pregnancy, very, very high numbers. A lot of kids are growth stunted, and some are severely growth stunted, right across the board, and there's an obvious reason for this. I guess the best way to put it is that there is a link between who the mother is as an environment and who the kid is becoming. It's a chemical process, giving birth. And a lot of the mothers in this town actually they don't have enough vitamins, not enough food. Quite a lot of them drink during pregnancy or take drugs during pregnancy. That's not a good idea. And it causes a whole lot of problems for the kid in later life. I'll explain briefly, and it's not an area I expected to get into, as I said, exactly what happens. And that is that the creation of life is the result of three information systems, if you like. There's the father's DNA, which is ancient, millions of years have been made, and the mother's DNA. That's what comes in the cell. But very new research, and this is where biosocial comes in, called epigenetics, is showing that the information of moment by moment is actually also coming through the cell wall and telling the protein system to make certain things. And so what is happening is that there are three factors that are making people, or any creature that is born this way. And one of them is the immediate environment, and the mother is that environment, and the mother is in an environment which is, if it's hyper stress and if it's taking in the wrong things or lack of nutrients, it will have an effect on young people. Now, why? That's really, what really is happening there? Well, if you build a kid in from a cell in a stressful environment, we are incredibly resourceful as a creature. All creatures are resourceful. We're built for survival. And what happens is that it's telling the development of that young person that it's a stressful environment and they need certain skills to survive in that. It's not as though something goes wrong, it's an adaptation that starts happening. And that adaptation is chemical in a way. There will be more dopamine in relation to serotonin. So the serotonin says, take it easy, think about it. Dopamine is the aggressive, go get it. And these are neurotransmitters. And what happens is that epigenetic trauma, if you like, is the result of an overactive dopamine system. And that is what the Dunedin Project is actually been discovering. Those kind of traumas that happen prenatal and postnatal, because the cellular development carries on for the first 1,000 days, more or less. So there's still changes that are happening at a cellular level after birth, before and after birth. Those are, if the environment is kind of stressful, it creates certain kinds of young people that, and 15, 16 years later, what happens is they are the kind of kids who very often will have higher levels of violence, higher levels of drug use, higher levels of stress. And that connecting with fatherlessness and things like that is a problem. Now, all of that bags together under the concept of I guess, what I would call resilience. What does a resilient kid look like? Kids that are growing up will have, they will be emotionally stable, they won't be overturned by influences outside themselves. And they don't have trouble making emotional connections. They don't have problems with others. And kids who do have that have a problem with relationships. They have a problem with attachments. And so when you have that resilience problem, kids start drifting. They start drifting. And what happens with these kids that are high stress is they're drawn to each other. And what I want to do is I really want to try and get somebody to run a test of the dopamine levels of my favorite gang, which I'm a member of, the Mongrels. I'd like them to all submit themselves to dopamine and serotonin tests to see if this is making sense. But my guess is that the core of quite a lot of these kids will be high dopamine. Now, the human race has survived for many years. That's an adaptation. It's not damage, as it were. It's a different kind of kid. And that has an implication for programs. If you want to put programs together around kids, you want to know what their drivers are. And if you take kids with very high dopamine, low serotonin, and you put them in a program that tells them to calm down and keep quiet and do this puzzle or do something like that, they're not going to be able to do it. Oscar Pistorius is my favorite example of one of these kids, brilliant at highly driven stuff, but doesn't have a barrier around, sort of a lack of understanding at a human level. So at a program level, these kids can be brilliant, but they need to be in the right kind of space. Now, what we have here, I think, is a lot of people, young kids in this town, which are risk-taking, they are insecure in attachments, there's a mistrustfulness around the situation, and they aim for immediate rewards, and they are not averse to aggressive behavior. And that is a beginning to sketch out some of the underlying things that we're going to start to look at when we look at gangs. There are a couple of other things I really want to look at, because I'm looking at the context within which gangs form. And one of them is education. We know that South Africa is performing very badly in the educational field. I've looked at a lot of studies, and the teacher content knowledge is low. Very often the teachers don't actually know what the subject is about. They just read the books and they can't go beyond it. And there's very little learning taking place. And most kids, school is very boring. On Wednesday I'm going to talk a little bit about how to make school unboring, or why it is boring. But all I can say is that a lot of the young people I talk to, they're bored out of their minds at school. They can't believe that they have to sit there. And very low reading levels. If you want to teach somebody to read, if you teach somebody to read, you've changed their life. And if you make them want to read, that's the first step in going forward. And frankly, reading is the beginning of one of the education systems that will help them get on in life. If you think about it, the kids that are born today will retire in 85? We haven't the foggiest idea what skills they will need during that life. Life is changing so fast that even the subjects, they'll need to be literate. To a certain extent, they'll need to be numerate, but beyond that, those subjects are going to change. But the one thing they need to do is to have an interest in learning. And if they don't have an interest in learning, they're going to fall further and further back. And that interest in learning very often is based in the ability to read for pleasure. So one of the solutions which you can get into is that reading is at the core of the whole change in how you can take these kids forward. Now, if you look at the trajectory through school, that many kids start school. If you take 100, of those, 60 write matric, 37 pass matric, 14 go to universities, some kind of qualifications after 6 years, 4.5, and 3% get a degree within 6 years of matric. That is a disaster in a country that needs skills like we have. Now, all the white area on that graph is the problem area in which gangs fall, because they're falling out of that space all the time. Now, we have this very high NEETs and linked, I mean, the NEETs, the kids not in school, not in training, etc., are part of that group that have fallen out of the bucket. And so one of the solutions has to be a transformation of the education system, and that I'll talk about a bit later. Another thing I want to look at, just as a preliminary to talking about gangs, is drugs. Drugs is a massive problem in South Africa. The illegal drug throughput in this country, the value of the economy around illicit drugs is estimated at 23 billion a year. That's how many. That's the illegal drugs coming through. That is massive. That's bigger than probably most large corporates. It's probably better than doing better than Anglo-American, and that is. It's an illegal economy. It's not caught up in anything. It's in illicit criminal economies. The rules are different. You can't take somebody to court. You can't establish a treaty. Or you can't sign something on the line that says we agree to do. It's not that kind of economy. It's a very potentially violent and aggressive economy, and it's very huge in this city and this country. And I was doing a bit of tracking of where these things come from. Cocaine is coming from Colombia. It comes via Nigeria, and because you can't sell drugs in a monetary economy, because the Financial Intelligence Center, for one, which just bust Zuma the other day, was it him? No, the Guptas. Sorry, no connection. It tracks financial flows. Anything over 2,000 Rand that you do in an ATM or anywhere, the Financial Intelligence Center in Pretoria knows about. So if you have a money economy that's coming out of nowhere, they're going to track you. So the drug economy operates on bartering. And if you're bringing in cocaine, what you're doing is they trade in cocaine for your stolen cars. Stolen cars they go to Nigeria, they go to Angola, they're going into the Congo. That's where your stolen cars are going, and they're buying cocaine. Heroin is coming from Afghanistan through Turkey, through Kenya, and it's often traded for poached ivory. So if you want to know there's an ivory problem, it's probably that we have a heroin problem. Very often that is how things are being purchased. There's very innovative methods of getting heroin into this country. A storm washed up a whole lot of floatable sort of plastic things in I think it was Neisner, and they were absolutely full. They were floating. They were completely sealed. They had heroin in them, and they had little beeper transmitters, and they were being radio tracked down the coast, and the fishing boats would pick them up. Just the storm blew them on shore. So that's the heroin route. The crystal meth route is China and India. They trade the ingredients because we make the stuff here. It's just a laboratory. They trade that for abalone. So the whole abalone poaching is linked to the crystal meth. Ecstasy is being made here in clandestine laboratories. Cannabis, well, dacha, we know where that comes from. And neope is low-grade heroin cut with anything like rat poison and all sorts of stuff. It's dreadful. It's not good for you. One of the interesting things, and we really have to, and I will look at that on Wednesday, the war on drugs has completely failed. The drug use is going up, even though the cost in human lives and money is going up at the same time. The war on drugs across the planet, and driven by America, it has come apart. The guy who implemented it, a guy called Ansinger, I think his name, Anslinger, in the 1930s, he was a vehement misanthrope. He didn't like Chinese because he thought they were corrupting American women, and he didn't like Arabs. He was like, and he actually created the War on Drugs program. And the head of the CIA at the time was in with him, and it suggested but not proved that the reason there was a link between them is that the head of the CIA was addicted to heroin, and this guy was supplying it through this process. But that's hearsay. Basically, he put in place a military operation that has put half the people in the States in prison as a result, and linked to drug issues and clogging up the courts. Exactly the same thing is happening here. So the whole business around drugs needs to be re-looked at, because the gangs, and we look at it tomorrow, how the gangs use drugs and the gang wars and stuff like that are all around the drug trade, and you can get anything in the city. It's quite amazing. I thought my kids were really clean, and I said to my daughter, if you wanted to get heroin, where would you go? Oh, she said she knew actually all the places where you could get the different kind of drugs. I said, you don't take these things, do you? She said, no, I don't, but everybody knows this. It's common knowledge. Of course we know where these things come from. It's standard, it's part of the culture. Youth culture knows where to get its dope. She's university trained, a professional, all of those things, but still she's part of that. She knows about it. So the impact of drug use is very bad. First of all, the problem is with mothers are taking drugs while they're pregnant, and as we've seen, that can cause major problems to the fetal development. It's causing fatherlessness as well, because the fathers get involved in the drug trade, and they're really not responsible parents when they're drugged up. It's raising levels of violence. There are turf wars, and a lot of the wars that you see, the shooting wars that are happening in the townships here, are turf wars over drug territories. It's wasting policing. I was talking to a lot of, I gave a talk to the top police in the city, and I was saying to them, you know, if you took away the drug problem, what would happen? And these were guys with, you know, lots of stars, and they'd been thinking about this, and they said it would halve our work, and it would halve the work in the courts, and it would halve the population in prisons. The drug situation is ridiculous. And one of the problems is that government people, and we as well, think that the drug problem is linked to the police, and the police ought to police better so that we don't have a drug problem. There's absolutely no way, and the top police have agreed with me, that the police can deal with the gang problem or the drug problem. They are the last resort. All these things come apart, and then when they do, the cops are called in to deal with that last issue, and they can't do it. There's no way they're going to do it. They have to fail. And, you know, quite apart from that, you get corruption in police and things. But, you know, I don't think it's as high as people make out. It's like gangs are not as huge as people make out. The press does that. It amplifies things. Anyway, in summary, really, gangs form in the city because of unsafe environments that they're in. They form because kids are dropping out of school. The school system is failing. The economy is beyond their reach. A kid without a cell phone is nobody, but there's no way they can get it because they're too poor and they're in the streets and they haven't got an education, so where do they get it? So the gang is a route into the stuff that you need to be a teenager. One of the issues all over the world where you find high gang levels is when you have proximity of wealth and poverty. If kids are over there away from the wealth, there's a lower gang potential than when you've got kids right up against wealthy areas, like in Cape Town. This dual city problem is one of the causes, actually, of gangs, because they look over there and they say, look at that stuff, I want that stuff. And you know, they all try and get it. Marketing of status products is another issue. The marketing issue is pushing the need to have the stuff, to be a man, to be a woman, to be pretty, to be healthy, to be well-dressed, is pushing stuff at people who simply cannot afford it because they don't have the wherewithal to get that stuff. But they will attempt to get it, and that leads into the whole gang thing. The illegal drug market is out of control. It really is out of control, and that's another issue. And there's very high levels of violence within and around these kids all the time. There's these problems of early attachment, the absence of fathers, the parental problems. And in a way, gangs are a positive survival strategy in an impossibly ridiculous situation. It's almost that ganging is, in a sense, a resilience. It's a positive resilience in an impossibly bad environment. So I'm not saying gangs are good, but I am saying that it's completely understandable if you look at the situation in which they find themselves. These are a couple of, I was picking up how much things were costing in the streets. It's quite an interesting exercise. If you go around looking like you're looking for something, people will tell you stuff. So those are the current prices of the various items you might want to buy in the streets. It's interesting that LSD is quite high. Ecstasy is quite low. Ecstasy, of course, is made in laboratories all over the city. The drug routes are they're all over the world. The stuff is moving. The illicit economy drugs are probably the third highest economy in the world in terms of the amount of money. And if you look at the Western Cape, it's very high. This is the drug abuse. These are statistics from Stats SA. The Western Cape is on the left there. It's pretty high. If you look at drug-related crime per province in South Africa, they are terrible things, aren't they? But everybody needs one.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, no problem. I got one too. It often goes off at the wrong time. Drug-related crime, Western Cape is way far ahead. One of the reasons is, interestingly, that we are a conduit between East and West, and drugs are moving not just into Cape Town, but through Cape Town. We're a container port. We are the way that heroin will get to the West. We are ways that the cocaine will get to the East. So there's a lot of drug stuff around. And I guess the conclusion and where we will go forward from tomorrow is there are so many influences, individual influences, public influences, and perceptions about gangs that these kids are embedded in the process of being in gangs. Now, I don't expect you to read all that. That's just a sort of impression. And if you want to ensure that
That slide, is that your research or is it from somewhere else?
that is my research, yeah. I'll tell you where that comes from, actually. I've been advising the province on the gang problem, and they keep pulling me in to say, what can we do? A side issue is that the National Intelligence Service has put together a gang strategy for the whole country, which is absolute nonsense. I don't know where they've thumb-sucked that out of, but they're imposing it on the provinces. So the local Western Cape is very aware that it's not a good idea. So they're scrambling to try and put together a decent plan for gangs, and what I'm doing is assisting with that process. So we put together shapes and structures, which I will talk about on Wednesday. But in conclusion, really, and then we can chat if you can ask some questions, is if you want to ensure that your city has a gang problem, you do certain things, and we are good at this. We damage your community. You ensure gross inequality. You make it impossible to get a job. You collapse farming because you have a massive in-migration into the city, and that's calibre is largely the Eastern Cape in Cape Town. You neglect your education. You make drugs accessible. You make guns accessible. I can get you any gun you like probably within a couple of hours, including AKs, no problem. You make sure that you're unlikely to get caught. You know, take a guess at the amount of convictions against arrests in this country. Anybody? No? 5%. Now, that means you have 95% of getting off if you get arrested. You retain useless cops. These are genuine photographs. Asleep next to his 9mm. I mean, I don't know. So, this is the sort of context within which we're going to look at gangs. It's where gangs are. It's, in a sense, partly why gangs are. And what we're going to look at next is exactly what gangs are. Now, in general, there's a couple of memes that I want to leave you with because they are the context within which of much of what I'm talking about. A meme is the sort of core idea, if you like. One is that there is a puzzle over what gangs are. When I started this research, most people would tell me exactly what a gang was, and they knew. And the more I looked, the less I knew, until finally I was completely confused. So we need to understand what a gang is in order to, and that's what we're going to look at tomorrow. And it's quite surprising because it's not often what you expect it to be. And another thing we have to ask is, why do kids join gangs? What is it about gangs? We've partly looked at that, but there are other reasons. And then there's Because another thing that needs to be looked at and understood is that I call it the difference between life course persistent behavior and adolescence limited behavior. People would say to me, that family there in Elsie's River or Manenberg, their kids did well. They went to the same school as the kids next door. They went through university, they're professionals. These guys, the kids went to the same school, they hit the gangs, they hit the drugs, half of them are in jail, one of them's dead. What is the difference? What are we looking at here? And understanding what happens, both in the family, biosocially, if you like, and socially and contextually, and what is the relationship that those parents and that context is having with those kids, makes all the difference. Because we are all of you and me, are adolescent, limited delinquents. We've all caused shit. And that's what you're supposed to do when you're a teenager. That's what you have to do to find out who you are. But we got out of it, I hope. I mean, yeah, I presume, because you're sitting here. What is the difference and how do people fall into it? And another thing is that this comes from Yuval Harari, and I recommend you read him, Sapiens. He wrote the book Sapiens. I don't know whether anybody's read it. It's probably the most brilliant history of humankind I've seen ever. Arnold Toynbee used to be up there as my favorite, but he's been absolutely knocked off the shelf by Harari. But his idea, one of his key ideas, is that we imagine the world into existence. It's not that this is an imaginary world, it's an imagined world. We imagined this stuff into existence. We humans thought it and made it. It's not that it's there and we are here and there's nothing we can do about it. We imagine so much into existence, and we imagine laws into existence. When I started studying criminology, I was trying to figure out what was a crime. I thought I'd start, it's criminology, what is crime? It seemed a good place to start. And I dug around a lot, and I came to the finding that crime is what we define it to be. That's all. It's a definition. It's not an act. It's the definition of the act that makes it a crime. So at least the reason why that's interesting is if we can imagine something into existence, we can reimagine it. We can rethink the structure. And that has a lot of resonance, particularly when we start looking at solutions with relation to these kids. And I guess the last thing is that we're all storytellers. We tell how, even though we often lie to ourselves, we are always telling the story.